All right. Next topic we had. This is another kind of weird story that went under the radar, which, I mean, nobody's really even talking about it now. Like Jamie even called me about it. But nobody's really talking about it. And this is also kind of a weird thing that nobody had any idea about. But Rasmus Ristolainen during the off season had a stint with the Finnish military. Now, for those of you who are not aware, in Finland, as 18 to 29 year old male, you're required to go into the military. So he has time in the military in general. It most likely, we didn't experience this, but it most likely happened when he was with Buffalo, or even potentially a little bit prior, where he spent time in the military as required by the nation. I can tell you, I'm Israeli. That is something you go through in Israel. Finland's got a very small population, like Israel, and typically in those type of countries, you kind of use everybody as your reserves, so everyone is required for military duty. I would imagine it's not as enforced as it seems from the outside, but it definitely is almost a rite of passage and frowned upon not to go. To some degree, maybe you can get out of it, but unless you have a good reason, you can't. And this happens with Israeli soldiers as well. Even if you're working in an office job later, typically they will pull you back in at some point to go through training, through boot camp again, because they want you to be fresh and, to remember what you've learned back in the day. And that seems to be what he experienced. I have to say, one, it's good that it's actually, military service. So you're actually doing, physical training to some degree. But I have to say, when you look at John Tortorella and the fact that I think his son is in the Marines, if I remember correctly, and he refers to his son as a leader of men, most likely John Tortorella loved this, was all for it, and probably gives him an appreciation for Ristolainen, because I could see Tortorella this hitting kind of like a hitting home for him. I know he believes in military service, so overall, I think it's interesting. I hope that it doesn't affect any of his off-season training. And so far, I would say it didn't look like it. But I thought it was an interesting story nonetheless.
Yeah, it's definitely something that you don't hear quite often, especially with somebody at Ristolainen's age. But as you were saying, I mean, it happens in the sense that people can get called back all the time. And I mean, it happened to him this summer. Obviously, missing 8 weeks of your typical training isn't ideal for any player. But as you're saying, right, it's the military. So there's some sort of physicality in terms of whatever training he was probably doing there. It's not going to be to the same extent in terms of what he would have maybe at the Flyers facilities or like professional facilities that he would be training at or being able to get on the ice, let's say. But
Yeah.
I mean, there's still some sort of physical nature to it. It's interesting from the sense that, I mean, Ristolainen obviously is a guy that, has a type of nationalistic pride to go back and do that for his country and for Finland here. And with the Tortorella connection and, his kind of involvement just in terms of like the military, his son, and his attitude towards that. I think if anything, it probably builds a stronger relationship between Torts and Risto here.
I think so.
So it's probably a good thing for Ristolainen, just because I mean, there's another kind of level that him and the coach kind of have in common in this situation. But I am, interested to see Risto in game action, kind of see if, him losing that time does affect his game. He probably had the best defensive season of his career last year. So you want, as the Flyers to see him follow that up, especially with, losing some pieces on the back end here. So the Flyers cannot afford Ristolainen to not really play like he did last season, right? They're going to need that same player again. So you just have to hope that losing those 8 weeks, doesn't affect him and his ability to kind of get back into the thick of things and return to that form that he showed last season.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it will. But it is, it is interesting. Anytime you're taken off the ice to different kind of training, you don't know exactly what that'll manifest to. But he's a pro at this point,
Yeah.
and I don't think for Ristolainen, from what I understand, it should have even potentially gone longer. So he got out earlier. So you can tell they kind of let him go even earlier to get back for training camp and get prepared for the hockey season. So I think he should be okay. Again, he's already kind of a physical specimen, so I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue for him when it comes to weightlifting and all that stuff, right? Like
Yeah, he's a beast.
training is not something he's lacking on. where like Sanheim does need the strength training more than Ristolainen. Ristolainen's already very strong, which I think plays in his favor.